In our leading story, President Cyril Ramaphosa and other leaders from the continent have arrived in Ukraine for the African Peace Mission. Meanwhile, the president's security detail has been stuck on a plane for over 24 hours. But that has now been, they have now rather been allowed to disembark, and that includes a media contingency. Newzroom Afrika's Govan Wittels is one of the media personnel that is stuck on that plane. He'll give us detail of where we are in this situation. The matter is quite fluid a little bit later on. But for now, though, we speak to Dr Jason Musyoka. He's an Africa expert in terms of the optics of what is happening. Dr Musyoka, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. What have you made of events as they have unfolded today?
Thank you so much, Dudu. So I think that there is always a context to what is going on, and as you rightly reported, the contingents, the team is heading to Warsaw at the moment, and under President Ramaphosa's leadership. The issue here is one needs to see the divisions within the team itself, and I think that this is not anything new. This is a situation where we've really not had our house in order as African Union. And I think if you look at just the ideological differences, the alliance differences between African countries, the African Union is very much a theoretical body still. There are ways in which there is some form of convergence happening, but far from that yet at the moment. So what we are seeing again is the divisions that the African Union always has. And that's been carried forward even in a peace mission that is, of course, being negotiated now out of the continent. And I think that, it really disables the effectiveness of the body itself to respond to global peace missions such as these ones. But then, of course, one also needs to appreciate the fact that the issue is complicated, given that you have a lot of African countries with historical ties to Russia. But Ukraine, there has not been a lot of historical ties with Ukraine, but there is trade ties with Ukraine, particularly in terms of importing of fertilizer and grains from Ukraine. So it's complicated on, do you keep the historical political ties intact and mess up your food security, or how do you balance between the two? And I think that is the complexity of this issue.
What further complicates it is that this is meant to be a peace mission, yet there's been a hostile reception for the South African delegation, at least. What then do you read or interpret from that situation?
I think that in theory, South Africa particularly has been, putting forward the argument that it's non-aligned. But the facts are very evident that South Africa is on the side of Russia, particularly given the storm that we had just a few weeks ago concerning the supply of weapons. Whether that's true or not, we are yet to see the evidence. But South Africa is not non-aligned by any stretch of imagination of that definition of alignment. But unfortunately, you also have other countries like Egypt, which is a large player in the continent, which is also, like South Africa, has historical ties with Russia, and they have gravitated towards supporting Russia. Then you have some other countries, this would be your Zambia and Comoros, which have a very strong ties with West, particularly as far as aid is concerned. And they've been quite vocal, particularly in support of Ukraine, particularly because of their alliance with the West. So these kinds of divisions that we see, yes, it's a peace mission, but it is very, very difficult to make any meaningful movement if you are on one side, and it's going to be a very, very steep climb in my assessment.
You've got these leaders from South Africa, Comoros, Zambia and Senegal that were huddled in a train as they went on over to Kiev. This delegation being led by South Africa. What message does it send to the rest of the continent that you've got the president's protection services, a media contingency that is not able to give you on-the-ground reporting because they are stuck on a plane? We spoke to somebody earlier on who mentioned that, well, this is also compromising the president's security.
So a couple of things. The one is that there are arguments coming out that it was permit issues, but when you have diplomats and high-level diplomats like presidents of nation states, they don't really go through that process of, checking security. So that argument is suboptimal as far as diplomacy is concerned. But also, secondly, and where I see some meaning in what is going on, and particularly with the leaders being huddled into a train, they actually went from Poland with a train. It's the flexing of muscles by a NATO member state, which is, trying to demonstrate that it has to be by its terms. And by its terms, it is keeping perspective a representative of NATO, and by that virtue also a representative of Western interests. And so when you have these leaders who supposedly are in support of Russia, I think it is a way of trying, in my assessment, to intimidate or to bully them to understand that ultimately, they can't go to a European space or European territory and support an opponent, which they think that, they should be supporting on the other side. So it really is the geopolitics playing out and flexing of muscles. But I do think that African member states certainly need to consider that because there are agreements, international protocols that guide how nation states relate as far as security of presidents are concerned, I think that is something that the African Union certainly needs to step up and perhaps push back and suggest that this kind of trend will be reciprocated if you have other presidents coming into the continent. I think there needs to be a voice responding to that. But in summary, it really is a flexing of muscles by a NATO member state, which is trying to push back against any form of support that might be going towards Russia.
Then you've got the presidents of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, the Republic of Congo, and Egypt that were initially meant to be part of this peace mission that have since pulled out. I mean, this question is best posed to them in terms of they look at this and they think what, especially given that they did not go. But your interpretation, you mentioned that this speaks to divisions among member states of the African Union on the continent. However, you've also got a broader argument from some sectors of society that say, well, this again demonstrates that why must you have a number of leaders from this continent get on a flight to go meet with one man or one woman or whoever it is, instead of people coming onto the continent in the name of this peace?
So there are also 2 points to underscore on that. The one is that there has been voices on the African Union level pointing to that point that you've just made. The Kenyan president and the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, has been very vocal. They have been very vocal in ensuring that the representation of the continent is done from AU level, and AU representatives need to be there, not a range of presidents from the continent. So I think that this issue here, I'm sure that deep analysis suggests that it is still a ideological division between the group that believes that AU should be the representative, the legitimate one, and then you have the more powerful member states that are pushing through, like South Africa, that would be pushing through and marshalling others to join as individual member states. So that's the first point to make. The second point to make is that, the arguments made by the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, they are flimsy about the reason why he did not go. For his argument is that he's got COVID complications. But of course, Uganda lately has kicked a lot of international dust because of the issue of gay, the curtailing of gay rights in Uganda. And I don't think they want to complicate this issue further, particularly being identified as aligned with the Russian team. So that's the one point. And then, of course, the DRC made it clear that it's not safe to go to Kiev. So I think these arguments being made are more cosmetic. The real reason why these presidents are not really willing to join this cohort is because, again, of the complexity of how you manage on one side, Western interests, and at the same time make sure that you make your arguments hard as far as Ukraine is concerned.
Dr. Jason Musyoka is an Africa expert. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.